Hey everyone, Mark and Steve here.
Before we get started today, we want to let you know about Dare to Connect, our new online interactive video platform.
For less than the cost of a therapy session, you and your spouse get live access to both of us 3 times a week.
Each 30-minute live group support session provides interactive mentoring and healing for addicts, spouses, and couples.
If you're loving our podcast and our unique style of bringing you recovery, you're going to love Dare to Connect.
To learn more, go to daretoconnectnow.com. We're looking forward to seeing and working with you. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PBSC podcast. I'm Steve Moore. We've got Mark Castleman here with us today as well. It's good to be with you guys as always, bringing you a crazy duo interaction about all things sexual addiction. So
yes,
we've actually got a pretty cool topic for today. We had a submission from a client that's going to hit on something that we don't always cover as much as we would probably like on the podcast. We do cover it in other forums like Dare to Connect and things like that, but this probably hasn't been addressed in a minute. So we wanted to reach out and respond. This was a message that came in a few weeks back from a subscriber. His name's Brian, or a subscriber to the podcast. Submitted a couple weeks ago, and this is what he says. I have been found out for the 8th time. So he's an addict struggling with recovery. I'm working with my counselor to work on my recovery. She says she's not sure how much longer she will stay in the marriage. I will not fail to work on my recovery this time. I am in an SAA 12-step group. For those who don't know, that's Sex Addicts Anonymous, different from Sexaholics Anonymous slightly. I am in an SAA 12-step group. I will work on myself to make myself a better man. Here's my question. I truly want to be transparent. However, she is not willing to work on her issues. So how can I be transparent and expect her to respond in useful ways? I'm afraid it will not go well. I want to do the once every 24-hour check-in, something we talk about on the podcast here often. How do I do this and make it a useful tool if I'm the only one in recovery? I know I can only control my recovery. How do I successfully bring her into the process if she refuses to be in recovery as well? So lots of thoughts to this. I mean, right off the gate, we'll tell you, Brian, we our heart goes out to you and your spouse. We know that many are listening, and as you know, if you've listened for any amount of time on here, Mark and I can absolutely relate to the tension and the strain around a relationship that's been going through addiction and betrayal for a long time, which sounds like is definitely the case here. So we appreciate you writing into us, and we'll do our best to answer some of this today.
Yeah, and of course, the thing that jumped out at me, this might sound obvious, but maybe not to people listening. He said, I have been found out for the 8th time. That's a really telling statement. There's a couple of aspects to that. One is, of course, the number of times, right? 8. But the fact I have been found out. In other words, I was caught. I didn't volunteer it. This wasn't something that I came forward on. I was caught for the 8th time. So really important to look at those aspects and what that means for how he's been coming at this, and especially how she's been feeling through all of that. Now, I'm assuming this has probably been going on for quite some time. And if he was found out for the 8th time, how many times were there that he wasn't found out? Yeah. Right? What has been the extent? And we think as addicts, guys, and I thought this too, well, if my wife hasn't caught me, then she doesn't know about all the other times. That's a big mistake on our part as addicts, because our wives, especially women, have this intuition, this feeling. How many times, Steve, with the gals we've worked with who said, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong for a long time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and not only do you have that factor going on, I think, but there's what we see with pretty much every single spouse, right? That comes through the door of betrayal. This unfortunate insanity that we talk about all the time is one of the most devastating pieces, is how trauma works in the brain, which we often, cover on here, and how, the brain goes to that worst case scenario, right? And when we have a hard time trusting or opening up or taking in truth versus not, or being able to filter that out, right? What most wives are left to is, however much they've discovered, wherever they're at, what's the brain telling them? There's gotta be more.
Yeah. What don't I know?
What don't I know? There's gotta be more.
If I was foolish enough to be duped on 8 of these, how many others were there?
And not just that, right? But also then because he doesn't specify in here what this 8 times specifically references.
We don't know what it is.
But it's the gravity of it as well, right? Not to say that one trauma is more so than another, but it's not uncommon, for example, a wife to say, well, geez, if I discovered the pornography in the strip clubs, I mean, has he had affairs and would I even know? Right? Has he gone out and physically slept with somebody? Would I even be aware of that? Right. And so we've got this. There's this whole element to this side of wherever a spouse finds themselves at, there's going to be that struggle to begin with. But I really do empathize, and I know this may not be the first thing this subscriber is looking to hear, but I think that the most important step as we go forward with this and answering your question, sir, is going to be, I guess, in a loving way, maybe giving you a full perspective of what you're probably up against. Because like Mark is indicating, with a minimum of her finding out about this 8 times, I have a client who, I guess they're a current client, but I've worked with them for some time, where when we first began working together, kind of one of the low points, his basic story was he was an addict for a long, long time. He and his wife found really good recovery. They did a lot of work, did a lot of therapy, made a lot of changes. And a couple of years after they got into a recovery place, for reasons that, are too much to go into here, long story short, she found herself caught up in the beginnings of an emotional affair, and he ended up discovering that. And it was interesting working with him because he kind of gave a new perspective on this. It was, and this is the first time I'd heard of a situation like this, but he was the former, I guess you could say, quote unquote, betrayer, who now found himself on the other side of the fence, right, as the betrayed. And not to say that anything equalizes anything else out, because it doesn't, but it was interesting for him to kind of talk about, having been on the one side of the fence for so long and then switching. And as we were talking one day, he said something really telling. He said that he caught this fairly early, but he was the one who found out about it. And he said something along the lines to the following to her. He said, they were like a month into the process of after him figuring this out. And he said to her one day, if this is even close to what I put you through for years, for a decade, what I felt for the last month, and the unsurety and not knowing, he just said, I just can't even tell you how much more sorry I am now. And not that I wasn't before, because again, they'd done a lot of recovery work and he had been sober for several years, but he just said, I can't even imagine how this must have been, because again, that dynamic of him finding it out, he was in this place of not just dealing with the betrayal itself, but not feeling like he could trust or where to go or what to do, and just feeling paralyzed. And so I take that thought and that situation and I apply it here. I'm just trying to fathom what that would be like for a partner 8 times to discover that 8 separate different times. And again, we're lacking some context in this. So I don't know if that's eight relapses back to back, or if that's over time or whatever that is. But I can only imagine that for a spouse, 8 times having found out about betrayal and never having it disclosed, to say that your spouse, I think this guy's name is Brian, I believe. Mm-hmm. Brian, to say that your spouse is struggling to trust you, I can only imagine is probably the world's biggest understatement. To say that she is suspicious or leery is probably also the biggest.
Well, and if we step back, I would have to say that if a spouse in this situation is healthy or a little bit healthy, and if she, I don't know if she's working with a counselor, but if she were working with a counselor, if she were working with me, for example, I would absolutely encourage her to hold back, to be cautious, to step back, to let's wait and see. Right. This is the 8th time he's been found out. I know that he says, this time I'm working on my recovery. I guarantee it. This time I'm serious. This time I'm moving forward. That's fantastic. And we applaud Brian for taking that step and going forward. But wouldn't a spouse where this is the 8th time, wouldn't she be wise to kind of step back and say, let's see if this is long lasting. Let's see if he's really all in. Because for her to just blindly say, okay, I believe you, and now I'm going to expose myself to whatever happens, that's just not wisdom after all of those events, right? She has to step in and guard herself for her own safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would echo that as well. Again, we don't know where that's coming from, whether that's from a place of just hurt or anger or whatever it is. But I completely agree with you, Mark. I mean, I think that she really ought to be creating some sort of space on a healthy level, and seeing true progress, I think, before she can invest that way again. And I think that that's very, very appropriate.
And I like the way you term that, before she can truly invest.
Yes.
Again, in the relationship, right? Because the way he's talking here, he wants her all in. How come she's not all in? Mm-hmm. Well, there's got to be some pretty significant evidences and signs along the way for her in a healthy way to be willing to be all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, we're not trying to come down on you. We're just trying to be real with you. A couple of addicts to another addict, pairing that with our experience doing, as therapists, she really ought to be taking space, and frankly, she should be skeptical. We really applaud your desire to do this check-in process with her. I think that that's really good, but I think it's going to be fair to say that it's reasonable to expect that that's going to be a one-sided check-in for a while. And it may not even be personal. I've worked with situations similar to yours, and I can tell you it wouldn't be uncommon, again, if this were a client in my office, just like Mark was saying, where you would be checking in more or less to kind of dead air for a period of time. Yeah. Where it would just be like a written check-in that you're submitting, where you're 100% transparent on everything from your sobriety to what you're doing to stay sober, to insights that you're having into recovery, and to everything else. Being really candid, again, we just say this from a place of love. We're just trying to help cultivate a sense of empathy and where your wife is probably coming from, and maybe give you a different perspective on your situation. The fact that she's even still there is frankly a minor miracle, just based on some of the facts that we're taking from this. I mean, that's a lot. That says at least potentially a lot about your wife's, the fact that she's even there and entertaining this concept, and you guys aren't divorcing right now is something to be encouraged by. And so I would say that if plan on it being a little bit one-sided. If it's me, and I'm your therapist, I'm going to be saying something along the lines of, okay, I think we need to feel out where your wife is, right? For her part, in terms of, is she willing for you to check in with her right now? Is she even willing to do that? And if so, what does that look like? And if she's not willing to open up and share what she's doing or not doing in recovery, I think that that's something that ought to be respected. And I think that that's something that you should be planning on, like I said, offering up to her, is the way I would put that, unconditionally, for whatever period of time it takes for her to be able to feel like this is, using that word again, where she sees enough of a change and enough solid ground where she would want to invest again.
Well, and I can talk to this from my personal experience, Brian. So that when I had lots and lots of missteps in my recovery, right? False starts and falling back and getting excited like the racehorse out of the gate and charging down the recovery track, only to fall dead and go back to all my old behaviors. That happened over and over and over again. When I finally did get, a I was ready to be solid and serious and long lasting, and which was a whole process for me, which we're not going to go into today. But, all the traumas and all the years of crap that I dealt with and just all the ways my addiction developed, it took quite a while for me to get on a solid track. And when I finally did, I could feel that I was and that I did, I got really excited. Hey, I'm in. This is working. I'm sober. It's lasting. I'm starting to open up. I'm being authentic. I'm being this guy I've always wanted to be. And I expected my wife to be right there, right? Okay, yeah, sweetheart, here I am. I'm serious. I'm solid. This is working. Where are you? Mm-hmm. And she was lagging. I interpreted it as she was lagging behind. And what I discovered later was really interesting. She said, I knew that even though you were hiding all your addiction stuff from me and I didn't know the details, I knew something wasn't right. I always felt that something was off. She said, your moods would swing. You were up, you were down. I never knew who was going to show up from 1 hour or day to the next. She said, frankly, I walked around on eggshells. Yeah. Because I thought, I got to hold this family together and I never know where Mark's going to be. And if I start expressing my stuff and my authenticity, he could completely implode and then we're toast. And so she had to hang back and watch my recovery and see me be solid for a lengthy period of time before she felt safe enough to begin to risk opening herself up. Because she'd been nailed so many times that she said, I got to have evidence and I got to have it for quite a while before I'm willing to put myself out there. Mm-hmm. And when she finally did, and she started to express, quote, her stuff, I'm going to tell you, it was tough. When she finally started to get honest and really tell me what she'd been through and what she was feeling, I got to practice what we call leaning in, sitting in her pain with her, moving toward her. So here's the thing, Brian, you actually don't want your wife to jump in with both feet too soon, because I don't know if you're fully prepared for what that looks like. If you want her to be super raw and honest and authentic and transparent and vulnerable with you and hit you with both barrels from inside of her, you better make sure you're solid enough in your recovery skills and tools and practice to be ready for such a thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight that you're bringing to the table, Mark, because it really is true. And just an additional perspective on that, right? If you are not solid in your own recovery, Brian, her holding back in some ways probably is the most loving thing that could be done for this relationship. Because again, there's so much about your story that we don't know. So we're making a lot of conjecture here, but if it's remotely close to what it's sounding like, I don't think your marriage probably has many comebacks left in it. If you're going to really make this the timing, it sounds like you're sincere. All we can do is take you at your word. Then this has got to be it. You know what I mean? You've got to be ready to go in all in and make sure you're going to stay all in, because there is a last time for every relationship. A relationship can only go through so much of this. I strongly believe that a relationship can come back from anything, but by the same token, he can only repeat the damage over and over so many times before somebody has to simply walk away.
Right.
And so before you guys lose that reparative element, before you lose that last opportunity to make that comeback, this may be, you may look back on this a few months from now and look at this as a tremendous blessing.
Right.
And so I think, so wherever you're at, right, wherever this, as we wrap up here, I think the sum total of this is the following. Right now, I think, and we would tell you this to some degree, regardless of the 8 times being found out and all that stuff. I know we've hit on that pretty hard today, but regardless, at the end of the day, who can you control? You can only control you. Your job right now is to be, frankly, the best damn version of Brian possible, right? And to be figuring that guy out, bringing that guy to the surface, finding your authenticity, figuring out what that means, figuring out what you're willing to do to fight for this relationship, and putting the focus 100% on you. And making that commitment that I am going, what we talk about here on the program all the time, that I am going to run my show. I'm going to run recovery, my recovery for me. And I'm going to just be the best damn Brian that I can become. And hopefully that includes, a life with my wife down the road. But if it doesn't, that doesn't change my direction. Because until she says she's done, I'm going to keep pushing for this marriage in every way that she'll allow me to. in a healthy way.
And frankly, Steve, that is a great test of whether you're solidly in recovery finally this time or whether you're not. If my recovery is dependent on whether my spouse or partner responds to me or doesn't respond to me in a certain way, and that controls my recovery, I know that I'm not in solid, long-lasting recovery.
Sure.
That place of solid recovery says, I'm doing this regardless. Come hell or high water, it's non-negotiable. It doesn't matter the outcome of my relationship. I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
I am doing this.
Yep, exactly. Nope, completely agree. And so that's what you're going to have to figure out, right? And start reflecting that. I mean, that really is the thing that's going to best give you. I mean, I hate putting it this way, but I do phrase this with clients sometimes, so that you can be the best Brian for this relationship or the next one. Hopefully, it ends up being this one, right? But regardless of what that means, whether you guys stay together or don't or whatever, all you can do is control is you. And so make that commitment to make that change for you. It's good to hear that you're in with a therapist. We'd encourage you to keep doing that and that you're invested in a 12-step program. And if you're invested with 12-step, it will teach you, frankly, a lot of what we're already talking about surrendering. You've got to let go of her recovery, let go of that reciprocity, and recognize that basic truth that we talk about in here all the time. There are 3 recoveries going on. There's yours, hers, and then the relationships. And you need to let them all happen on their own time. And there's going to have to be some flexibility there. Now, only you can decide how flexible you are with that. But given the nature and the background that you've told us, I think that, I don't want to say the right thing, but I think an understandable thing, given the circumstances, would be to give a pretty wide berth when it comes to asking for reciprocity from your spouse. So, Anyway, guys, we really do appreciate being with you as always. These are complicated topics, that we cover on the podcast, and we love jumping into them. The best forum, hands down, to really get into the down and dirty with these things, which is what we do 3 times a week, is on our Dare to Connect program every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We meet with addicts, spouses, and couples. We have a group for each where we do this. Just this morning, we had a great, amazing conversation with our addict subscribers in the Dare to Connect program about a wide range of topics, ranging from pride to shame to a bunch of other things. And we got really deep on some situations, which was awesome. We love being able to meet with you and to connect with you, and we would love to see you in a program like that. It comes with a 2-week free trial. Please give it a look. If you really want to level up your recovery to the next level, Frank, we're not trying to toot our own horn, but frankly, we get nothing but positive results from it and positive feedback from it. It really is a game changer in recovery. Mark and I are doing our best to really change the spin on how recovery happens for people with that program and with others. So give that a look at daretoconnectnow.com. And you can also submit questions to us, as always, to be covered on the podcast at pbsepodcast.com. So,
yep, sounds good. Thanks, everybody. And we will look forward to being with you next time on PBSE.
Take care. Have a great week.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.